everyone! So today I'm going to show you how to make your very own thick reading sock. These are super fast to make and really quick and easy, and it should be a fun tutorial. There is a pattern in the comments down below, so feel free to follow along. One thing to note, there are two different options. So what you can do is you can either have two colors where you have different color for the cuff, the heel, and the toe, or you can do the sock all in one color with one skein of yarn. It's kind of up to you what you would prefer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the tutorial for the two color one, but if you are just doing one color, you can just sort of skip over the areas where I say to change colors. So anyway, without further ado, let's get knitting. First thing is you will need some yarn. So for this pattern, I am using weighted 6 yarn. This is super bulky yarn, but you can always use what you want, but I've attached a gauge swatch, so if you are going to use something different, just adjust accordingly. And I have two colors because I'm going to be doing the two color one, but if you're doing one color, you should be able to get 2 socks out of one skein of yarn. You will also need knitting needles. So these are size US 9 or 13 millimeter needles, which is what we're going to be using, and we are knitting in the round, so you will need rounded needles. You will also need some scissors and an embroidery needle. Alright, so let's get started. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take whatever color it is that you want to do for the cuff. So that's for the cuff, the heel, and the toe. That's going to be your color number 1. So I'm going to do gray for that. We're going to do a long tail cast on. We're going to cast on 24 stitches. For the cast on, the little trick that I like to know is you have to sort of figure out how much yarn you're going to need for the stitches in advance, which some people I'm sure can eyeball it if they've been knitting for a really long time, but I am not that talented. So what I like to do is I like to give myself a rough estimate. So I'll start with sort of a little bit extra, just as a tail, and then I will wrap the yarn around my needle. And every time I wrap it around, I sort of count that as a stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches, and I'll just keep going until I get to 24. Okay. So I'm going to sort of mark this area with my fingers so that I know where to do the slip knot. And we can just push this all off. Okay. Now, in order to do a slip knot, what you're going to do is take the yarn on this side, have the yarn that's not attached to the ball, and on the side the yarn that is attached to the ball. So with this yarn, you're going to put that behind. So wrap it behind. There we go. And then you're going to take the loop and you're going to grab this yarn, the unattached, the slip knot yarn, and you're going to pull on that. And then holding on to that, you're going to pull these both strings together until it creates a knot. Perfect. And then what you can do is just by pulling on one of the strings, that will actually tighten it a little bit. We're going to put this on the needle, and this is actually stitch number 1. So we already have 1 stitch, and I'm going to tighten that just a little bit. Perfect. Now one thing you want to look out for is you want to make sure that, as you can see with this knot, there's a string in the front and a string behind. You want to make sure that the string in front is your tail string, not the one attached to your yarn. So you might need to take this off and flip it around if it's the wrong direction. All right, now we're going to cast on. So if you've never done a long tail cast on, I will do my best to explain it. What you want to do is hold your first stitch, this knot, with this finger on your needle to secure it, And then you're going to take the 2 strings, you're going to hold them, and you're going to put your finger and your thumb in between the 2 and sort of pull them apart. And then I sort of pull them up like this. You can see that. And then we're going to do a little bit of a weave. And we're actually going to take our needle, we're going to go under the thumb here. We're going to go over this one and pull this one through that thumb loop, just like so. Now these stitches don't need to be super tight. They can be a little bit looser, and that's actually okay. And we're going to do that until we have 25 stitches on here. I know I said you cast on 24, but we need 1 extra for when we join in the round. So we'll just keep going. So 25 stitches. Now what we're going to do is we're going to move into the magic loop, and we're going to join these stitches in the round. So what I like to do is flip this over. So you have your stitches like this, and I'm going to push them all down to the end. We're going to divide the stitches in half, and we're going to put 1 extra on this side. So we're going to do 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. I'm going to put my finger right here, and on this side we should have 13. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13. Perfect. Now the fun thing about magic loop and why it's magic is if you bend this right here and sort of take this string, we bend this like this, you pull on this string. So now we have all of our stitches divided, and we have half of them on this needle. And half of them on this needle, like this. Now you want to make sure these stitches don't get twisted. So you want to have them like this so that you can see all of that. And if you flip it to the underside, this is the nice cast on side. So if it looks twisted, or if in here it looks slightly twisted, you may want to adjust that. So now we have 12 on this side, 13 on this side. And before we even start knitting, we are going to join them in the round. So we have our extra stitch here. This is stitch number 13 on this side. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to take it and we're going to move it to this back needle here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cast it off. So I'm going to take this needle this stitch right here, the second stitch, and I'm going to pull it over this stitch and cast it off, and then just tighten both of my 2 strings at the bottom. So now we should have 24 stitches, and we are joined in the round and ready to get started. So what we're going to start off with for this sock is we're going to start off with a rib stitch. And for the rib stitch, we're going to do 1 knit, 1 purl all the way around. And what I like to do is I constantly keep 12 stitches on one needle, 12 stitches on the other, and I just count when I'm done 24 stitches. But if you want to put a stitch marker here, this would be a good time to do it. So you're going to put it right here at the start so that you know that this is your first stitch right here. We're going to start knitting these stitches right here. So what we're going to do is pull. You want to make sure the string is attached to your back needle. We're just going to pull the needle out, leaving the stitches as is, and we're going to start knitting these 12 stitches. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a knit 1, purl 1. Make sure I grab the right string. It's this one. There we go. Not the cast on string. So we're going to do a knit, purl, knit, purl. Okay, so now we've done our first 12 stitches. So we're going to turn the needle. So now the stitches we've just knit are in the back, and we're going to pull on this string right here. Pull And we're going to push the stitches onto our needle so that we can knit them. This is our cast on, we can just leave that, that's fine. We're going to weave that in at the very end. And now we're going to do the same thing because we want to knit these stitches. So we're going to pull the needle out and we're going to get started. So knit, purl. We have done a full row of all 24 stitches. Row 1 is complete. So we're going to flip it back around. And we're going to do 8 full rows. So we've done 1, so you're going to do 7 more exactly the same. So knit 1, purl 1 of all 24 stitches as well. So keep going, you're going to do it 7 more times and then come on back. So I have now done 8 rows of rib stitch, and I'm back at the start. Got my cast on side here. This would be where your stitch marker is. And now what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple rows of straight knitting before we get to the heel. So I'll show you what that is on here. We're going to do this little section right here all the way around before we do the heel. So if you're changing colors, this would be the time to get the second color out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut off this one. I'm going to leave a little bit extra for when I weave that in later. Snip that off. I can put this to the side. I'm going to take out my second color. And we're going to start on our first 12 stitches. So there's many ways to join a second color. It's kind of up to you what you prefer, but I will show you how I do it. So I put my needle in as if to knit. And then I take my yarn and I'm gonna again leave quite a bit extra tail, and I'll show you why. I sort of double it over and I place this on just like so. So just like that. And then I have this little bit of yarn left over, and what I like to do is actually wrap that around the new yarn. And I'm going to hold that over in my left hand. And I like to do that so that it helps tighten it, and there's less chances of it creating a hole as well. So make sure all of this is tight, make sure this is tight, and then we just cast this one off. And now I'm going to do the next one, and I'm going to leave this doubled, and I do that for 2 more stitches. So this one, tighten that up a little bit, and this third stitch I will also leave doubled, and that just helps to ensure that it doesn't get pulled out later on. And now going forward, you can just ignore that extra bit, we'll weave it in later, and just take your regular yarn that's attached and keep going. And now we're just doing a straight knit. So we're just gonna knit all 24 stitches around of our 24 stitches. Perfect. So now we've done 1 row. Now we're gonna do a total of 4 of these, so we need 3 more. And when we go back to our first stitch, you'll notice we have a lot of yarn here. You can tighten this up still, but I like to sort of push this into the middle of the sock. And I do that because at the very end, when we weave in the ends, we're going to turn the sock inside out. So we want all of those little bits to be on the inside. So I have now finished 4 rows of this, and we are going to start the heel. I just wanted to mention that this is one of the sections that you can adjust if you need to. If someone has a larger instep, you may want to do a few more rows, because then what that's going to do is have it be a little bit longer here. So it won't be as low riding of a sock, but that's up to you. The other area that you can adjust is when we get to do the foot, you can make it longer. The hardest adjustment to do is to make the whole sock wider, and I will at some point be doing a pattern for that for sort of a man-sized foot, which is where you would cast on more stitches and then we would adjust the whole sock accordingly. But at this point, if you do want to do more rows, you can, but I'm only gonna do 4. So we are now ready to get started on the heel. So I've cut off the purple yarn because we're gonna change back to the silver in order to do the heel. Now for the heel, we're gonna be doing what's called German short rows. And they're really easy. It's the fastest heel that I have found, which is why I love it so much. But it is helpful, I think, to print off the pattern instructions and sort of record row by row what you're doing, just so that you don't get lost. I found that helped me a lot. We're working on the first stitch, and we're actually only, for the heel, we only do half the stitches. So we're only gonna be working on these first 12 stitches. We're not gonna worry about the back 12 stitches at all for the heel. We're only doing here. So if when I say turn your work, you're only going to be turning these 12 stitches. So just something to keep in mind as we go along. Also, there may be a bit of a gap between like stitches 12 and 13 and 1 and 24, and that's okay, because when we get to putting the whole thing back together, when we're done the heel, when we start connecting the sock again, we will fill in those gaps. So don't be afraid if there is a bit of a gap there, that's okay. We're going to get started, and just like when we changed colors before, I fold it over. I'm gonna have a little bit of a longer chunk. And the first row of the heel is we are going to knit 11. So we're going to knit all the stitches except for the very last one. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. So I'm going to put this over like this. Holding on to both of these. There we go. We're gonna knit a couple with both of the pieces of yarn wrapped around. There we go. Tighten that a little bit. 9, 10, 11. Okay, so now we are going to turn our work. And remember what I said, that we're only working with these stitches, we're not worrying about the other ones. So we are going to go back, and we are actually going to do our second row, which is purling these stitches. So what we're going to do is with the yarn in front, so not behind the needle, in front of the needle, we're going to slip this first stitch, and we're going to slip it purlwise, which means we're going to put the needle in as if we were going to purl, and then just slip it off like so. And then we're going to purl 9. So we're going to purl all the way to the end and not purl this last one. So 1, 2, 8, 9, so that we have 1 on the needle. Okay, and now we are going to turn our work. So when you do the short rows, basically what we're doing is we're going back and forth, and we're gonna slowly decrease the number of stitches that we do each time. So it's going to create gaps. Like you can see here, there's a gap, and here there's gonna be a gap. And as we create gaps, we're gonna be shortening the rows so that it's gonna create a shorter heel, and then we're gonna be coming back out and adding stitches on our way back. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna do the same thing, but we're gonna knit. So with the yarn behind, so in the back, not in the front, we're gonna slip the first stitch. Now this is a little confusing, but we're gonna slip it purlwise. So we always slip the stitch purlwise, even if we're knitting or purling, it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is where the yarn is. So if it's behind the needle or if it's in the front. So when knitting, the yarn will be behind, but we're gonna slip the stitch purlwise, and then we're gonna go in to knit, and we are going to knit 8. So 1, 2, 7, 8. So now we are down to 2, and we are going to leave it there, and we're going to turn our work. So now let's do this again. So we have the yarn in front because we're purling, and we're going to slip the stitch purlwise, and we're going to purl 7 so that there's going to be 2 left on the needle. So 1, 2, 6, 7. Perfect. So now we have 2 left. So we're going to turn our work. So we're going to do the same thing. So yarn behind, slip the first stitch purlwise, and we're going to knit 6. So 1, 6. So now we have 3 stitches left here and the rest on this side. And then we're going to turn our work. And you can see we're creating little gaps. And as you can slowly tell, it's a little hard to tell, but there is a bit of a cup forming in our sock. So now we are going to do the purl side. So we're going to have the yarn in front, slip the first stitch purlwise. All right, and we are going to purl 5. So 1, 5. Okay, excellent. Turn your work. So same thing, yarn behind, slip purlwise, and we're going to knit 4. 1, 4. Perfect. Turn your work, yarn in front. I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise and purl 3. 1. Perfect. Okay. So I don't know if you can tell, but it has formed a bit of a cup, right like that. And so now we have done this side, and now what we are going to do is we are going to do the same thing but in reverse. So we're going to be adding stitches back in. So we've done the decrease, now we're going to do the increase. So we're going to turn our work. You can see how that's formed there. So now we're going to do the exact same thing, but I'm going to show you what we're going to do to add stitches. So we're going to do this yarn behind because we're knitting, slip the first stitch purlwise, and we're going to knit 3. We're going to knit 2 just before the first gap. So 1, 2, 3, and now you can see we have a gap. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add a stitch right in here. So I'm going to look down in between here, and you can kind of see there's some yarn here. So I'm going to pick up a stitch right from here. I'm going to pick up this bar right here. I'm going to place it on here, and then we're going to knit. So this is the additional stitch, and this is our next stitch, and I'm going to knit these 2 stitches together. So I'm going to take my needle, go under both of them, yarn around, and knit them together, and that's going to sort of close that gap. So we're going to do that for all of the gaps on both sides as we go back and forth. So now we're going to turn our work, and we're going to do this on the purl side. So we're going to slip the first stitch purlwise, and we're going to purl 4, or to the first gap that we come to. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we have a gap. So we're going to do the same thing on this side. I'm just going to reach in here, and I'm going to pick up a stitch, plunk it on this needle, and now I'm going to purl these 2 together. So going under both, wrapping the yarn around, and purling them together. There we go. Turn your work. So now we are going to yarn behind. We're going to slip the first stitch purlwise. We're going to knit 5. So 1, 5, and now we have a gap. So we're going to do that same thing again. We're going to reach in here. We're going to pick up a stitch, just like so, and we're going to knit these 2 together. Like that. Perfect. And then turn our work. So slip the first stitch purlwise, 4, 5. Okay. So now we have another gap. So we're going going to pick up a stitch. I'm going to pick up this stitch. Should be better. And we're going to purl those two together. It can be a little tricky. There we go. There we go. Turn your work. All right. So slip the first stitch knitwise, knit 7, 1, 2, 7, and now we have a gap. So I'm gonna pick up this stitch right here, and we're gonna knit these 2 stitches together like so. All right, turn your work. So slip the first stitch purlwise, purl 8, 2, 8. All right, we've got a gap. So let's pick up a stitch. This one looks great right here. I want that one. Perfect. Let's purl these 2 together. Ooh, this is tight. Careful not to lose that. There we go. You can see our little heel. There it is. All right, let's turn your work. Yarn behind, slip. 1, 2, 9, and we've got our gap. All right, so now this is quite a big gap. So I'm gonna pick up this one just because I wanna make sure that I close that gap as much as possible. Oops. Oh, all right. There we go, and one more. This one. 1, 2, 9, 10, and our last pickup right here. Stitch right in the middle. Knit these 2 together. You might want to pull on this yarn a little bit just to tighten that up. There you go. And there you have your heel. So now what we're going to do is we are going to start on the foot, and we're going to end up doing a total of 20 rows. But the first 2 rows are a little bit more unique, so I'm going to walk you through those, and then I'll leave you to finish the rest of the 20 rows before we get to the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to start and we're going to knit, we're going to start connecting back into the round. So we're going to knit first row over our heel, and then we're going to come back to these stitches that we haven't touched in a long time. And we're just going to straight knit. And I'm going to tighten this because it's really important to keep this tight. We're going to want to start tightening everything up a little bit. So I'm just going to do one more with it doubled over, and then let go of that. And just knit to the end of these 12 stitches. Okay, so now in between stitches 12 and 13, we are going to pick up a stitch, and we're going to do that because there's a little bit of a gap here and we don't want to have a huge hole in the side of our sock. It's exactly what we did with the heel, where we're going to pick up a stitch. So right in here I'm going to look, and I'm going to pick up this stitch, I think right in the middle here, but you can pick up any stitch that you want, just like so. We'll tighten this, and then we're going to knit that additional stitch and this stitch 13 together, and this is really tight, so I struggle to even get my needle in there, but we'll make it work. Nope, let's try again. If I can get it to catch, there we go. Perfect. Okay, so now we're going to knit to stitch 24 to complete our first round of rejoining. So now what we're going to do is at the start of row 2, we are going to pick up a stitch again. So between stitch 24 and stitch 1, we are going to pick up another stitch, just so we can close the gap on this side. So I'm just gonna put these, my multitude of strings in here. Okay, I'm gonna turn this around, push these stitches back onto the needle, and we're going to pick up a stitch. So I'm gonna pick up this one right here, this little lovely little gap right there. And this one, we're gonna knit around like so. And then we're just going to knit the rest of the 24 stitches around just as a normal row. And that will be your second row. And then you just need to do 18 more and we will get to doing the toe portion. And like I said before, if you want to do more rows, if you want your sock to be a little bit longer, this is the point where you would do more than 20. But that's kind of up to you as to what you want to do. So I'm gonna finish up my last 24 stitches and then start on row 3. And I'll see you at the end of row 20. To do the toe, what I like to do is we're gonna be doing some decreases. But first I like to do one row just regular all the way around so that I can get a little bit extra of the second color in there. And I'm gonna go around and knit all 24 stitches. So now we're going to start our toe decreases. So what we are going to do is we're going to be knitting together the first 2 stitches and the last 2 stitches on both sides. So we're going to be decreasing by 4 stitches every time we go around. So to start with, we're going to knit these first 2 stitches together. So what we're going to do is instead of just going into one stitch, we're actually going to go under both. And this might be a little tight, but that's okay. So I'm going to stick my second needle under both, take my yarn, wrap it around, and then when I go through, I want to pull and make sure that I get both those 2 stitches on, only 1 stitch coming off. And there I have 2 stitches together. And then we're just going to knit 1, 8. Okay, and then we're going to knit these 2 stitches together as well, but instead of doing the same thing we did before, we're gonna do a slip slip knit. And what that's gonna do is, as you can see, these 2 stitches, it caused them to, when we knit them together, they went in at an increase and an angle like this. And when we do a slip slip knit, what it will do is put the stitches so that they are angled like this. And that will create a toe that's angled this direction, which is a much more aesthetically pleasing one than if we were to knit 2 stitches together and have half the toe go like this. So you're gonna take your right needle and you're gonna go in as if you're going to knit, but you're just gonna slip it off onto that needle, and then we'll do the same for this second stitch. So under as if to knit, slip your needle through. Now what you're gonna do is come back with this left needle and go under both the 2 stitches through the front like this. So I can get that back stitch. Oh, there we go. And then you have your needle in as if to knit, but we're gonna knit through the back. So just when the needles are like this, wrap the yarn around, knit, keeping that stitch on there, and pull through. And there you go. And I'll show you again when we get to the other side, because we're gonna do the same thing. There you go, don't wanna get tangled. Okay, let's do that again. So under these 2, like so, wrap the yarn around, knit through, and pull off. right. Now we're going to knit the next 8 stitches, 8, and now we're going to do that slip slip knit here again. So we're going to put our needle in as if to knit and slip that first stitch onto our right needle, and then we're going to do the same. So put the needle in as if to knit, slip it on, and then we're going to take our left needle and go back in under here like that, just like so. Wrap the yarn around and knit the stitch. Perfect. So now you've done your first row of decreases, and we're going to end up doing that 3 times. So what we're going to do is you're going to knit the next row. So knit the 12 stitches and then come on back. So now I've knit all the way around once again. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do our second row of decreases. So we're going to do exactly the same thing we did the first time. We're going to knit the first 2 stitches together, and we're going to slip slip knit the back 2 stitches. So we're going to slip the needle under both the stitches, put them together, knit the next 6 stitches, and then we're going to slip slip knit. So remember that's slipping in, needle back under, knitting around. Perfect. And let's do this other side of stitches. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna knit these 2 stitches together, and then slip, slip, knit. Perfect. Okay, now we're gonna knit the 16, sorry, but 8 on each row. We're gonna knit those again all the way around just normally. We're going to do our last row of decreases, and the great news is we're gonna do exactly the same thing we did before. Perfect. Now I like to do one more row around of just knitting the 6 stitches, but that's up to you if you want to do that or not. It's just a different look. It's entirely up to you, but I like to do that, so I'm going to do that and then be right back. So once you've done that, you are finished with the actual knitting. So the last step that we have to do is we're going to seam these stitches together. But we're actually done the knitting that we need to do. So what we're going to do is cut off the yarn, and you want to leave enough to seam. So what I like to do is go back and forth a couple times to make sure I'm going to have enough. So 1, 2, we'll do one more, 3. Perfect. Then I'm going to cut this off. Okay. Now you're going to leave your stitches on your needle because we're going to do a seaming process called the Kitchener stitch. What you want to do is line up so that you have all 12 of your stitches, 6 on one, 6 on the other, on both needles like so. And you want to have your yarn in the back, on that back needle. And what we're going to do is take our stitching yarn, and you're going to take an embroidery needle, and we're going to put this through like this. Perfect. A little bit of a tail so it doesn't fall off. And we're going to do the Kitchener stitch. So there's a rhythmic motion to this. It's a little bit of a pattern, but you have to sort of do it a few times to get used to it. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take our needle and we're going to go into this first stitch as if we were going to purl it. So we're going to go in the front like so, and we're going to pull the yarn through. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into the back stitch as if we were going to knit it. So right above that mark, go in like that and pull the yarn through. Now this is just sort of a set up those 2 little movements that we did so that it creates a little bit of a knot and doesn't pull out. Okay, So now we're going to start the actual Kitchener stitch. Is we're gonna go into the first stitch on the front needle as if to knit. So we're gonna put our embroidery needle in, pull the yarn through. We're gonna pull that stitch off. There we go, pull this through. Okay, and now we're going to go into this stitch as if to purl. Now what we're going to do is we're going to deal with these back 2 stitches and taking this stitch off. So we're going to go in this first stitch as if to purl, and we're going to pull that stitch off. And then we're going to go in the second stitch as if to knit. We're going to leave the stitch on the needle. Oh, sometimes that happens. You can just pull that off. There we go. Okay, so that's the pattern. And we're going to do that for all of these stitches. Now for these last 2 stitches, we just do it as we would. So we're going to go in this one as if to knit, pulling that off. And then in this back one, as if to purl, pulling it off. There we go. We don't need these anymore. And you have officially completed your sock. Last thing to do is just to weave in the ends, and I will show you how to do that. So to weave in the ends, what I like to do is I start at the toe, and I sort of take this yarn while it's still on the needle, and I just stick it into the inside of the sock. And then what I will do is I will turn the whole sock completely inside out. And what this does then is this allows me to look at the wrong side and to weave in all my multitude of ends, all the little ends. And the easiest way to weave in ends is just to simply go into some of these. You have endless supply of purl stitches, and you just sort of want to go back and forth a couple times just to make sure that the yarn is secure. You don't want to go too much in the same spot, or else it will sort of become bulkier. There we go. I think that's good. And then I can snip this off. Perfect. And you'll just want to do the same for all of your ends. So just weave them in like so. And the nice thing is if you have any holes here from where you did the heel, you can sort of use this yarn to tighten over the heels and over the holes so that you may not see as many of them if you did have any holes. Now, if you did the sock all in one color, then you don't really need to weave in any ends except for the one at the very toe, and this one up at the top where you did that. But yeah, I'm going to weave in all my ends and then come back and show you the finished product. All right, so I have now weaved in all my ends. So now what I can do is turn my sock back around. There it is, your very own sock. Excellent job, you guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please like and consider subscribing. I hope to do more tutorials like this in the future. And let me know in the comments below how your socks turned out. Have a great day and happy knitting. Bye.